Welcome to Transformative Principal, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. I mentioned in episode 462 that I'm doing a new training program called How to Be a Transformative Principal. It's for those who are in their first 3 years of being a principal, or assistant principals, or aspiring principals who want to level up their game right now. Join me at jethrojones.com/how2be. How to be. We'll see you there. That's jethrojones.com/how2be. Welcome to Transformative Principal. This is an awesome interview that I'm looking forward to today. I have Miriam Campbell, who is an SLP, speech language pathologist. She has a master's in social work and a teacher. She developed an SEL RTI model that schools and therapists love. It's adaptable, supports teachers, and is the only generalization model that she has found effective. School leaders are revolutionizing the way they support SEL development with this tool. So, Miriam, welcome to Transformative Principal.
Thank you. It is really an honor to be here. Thanks for having me here.
You are welcome. And just a little podcast tip for those of you who do your own podcast and listen to mine also. I like to start recording as soon as we say something funny in the pre-conversation so that we both come in with smiles on our faces, and I think people can hear that. So that was a little trick. I might have caught Miriam off guard by starting recording right at that moment, but I think that it's worth it because we both come in happy, which I think is a great way to start the show.
It's a good way to start class also.
That's right. Yep. And my mom did recently tell me that I need a voice coach because my voice is so boring. So I appreciate her feedback also. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, we need moms for that, you know.
That's right. She's the only one who can tell me that and not have me be offended. So that's good. So Miriam, I'm excited to talk with you today because SEL is really important. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know that I've had a big stake in the ground on SEL for a long time. One of my favorite episodes is the Formative 5 with Tom Herr, where we talk about how we really should be teaching SEL skills first and foremost, and all that other academic stuff will come along if we get that SEL stuff right. So, Miriam, first talk to us about your SEL RTI model and how you developed it and where it came from.
So I started out as a speech therapist, and I was working in schools, ABA clinics, and really, focusing on trying to give skills that were going to be skills that weren't just for the specific book that I was reading, but would be skills that would generalize. That if I was teaching main idea or topic maintenance or whatever the skill was, that I wanted it to be able to be something that would help the student with, how they were understanding their reading essay or how they were having conversation skill. That was always my focus. I always wanted it to be generalizable. So I was doing speech therapy in the schools and really loving it. And I would, after my, half-hour mandate, which is a little bit laughable, bring my student back to the classroom and try and make eye contact with the teacher who, because I have these very advanced social skills, I would notice they were not really available to me. And as they would nod at me really fast as they tried to quickly get back to the 30 other kids in the classroom. And, I discovered that there would be a little bit of disconnect because if I was teaching the skill, but I wasn't really able to get it into the classroom, then what was happening with all the hours of work that I was pouring into these students and all the strategy and the thinking and everything like that. And so that was a little bit frustrating. So then I, had to rethink, okay, so how am I going to do this? And I didn't really have an answer to it at that point. But I did also bump into another challenge, which is that I would be teaching a language construct or a cognitive construct, and I'd be having a really hard time getting through to the student because they weren't attending. Like, I didn't even have baseline cognition of attention to be able to have joint attention and be able to share information with them. Or they weren't emotionally regulated. They had a diagnosis of ADHD, or they had sensory challenges. And I really felt like if I'm going to be giving them these important life skills, like, I have to know how to reach them, how to help them with emotional regulation, how to help them with attention, and understanding where they were in their emotional world. And so I went back to school for social work. And then when I was working in the schools and, worked at different locations, at-risk schools and fabulous school for kids who had ASD. And I again found that, okay, so great. So I'm doing this work one-on-one. How am I getting it into the rest of their day? And that was the whole point of what I was doing, was like, I really care very much about making sure that the kids have this life skills and to be able to connect with other people and have all those things. And I was seeing that the generalization was not happening. So I happened to have made a move in my life at that time, and my licensure hadn't transferred. So I was working actually in Arizona. And I decided, okay, I'm here, I have this time, and I don't have my licensure. There was a local private school that was looking for a teacher to cover teacher's sick leave. And so I tried teaching. And then I discovered very quickly that teachers are our heroes.
Oh, now I get why the generalization wasn't happening. There's a million things going on in the classroom.
Exactly. And I realized, like, in order to teach emotional regulation, you have to be regulated. And it's very challenging to be regulated when you have 100 behaviors in your classroom. And when you have to keep in mind, okay, so what are my core courses, and can I let the therapist take them at this time? Or when do I have to make sure that this child has this other, the IEP says they have, there's so many things on a teacher's plate. And to add anything was almost laughable. And I'd gone into the classroom with the express desire to teach all the constructs that I was doing in my therapy sessions. Like, that was my motive. And I was still realizing this is impossible without having some type of like framework or structure to be able to teach what I'm already teaching. It just becomes a burden. It becomes another thing to do. It becomes like another responsibility and something else that I feel like I can't do on top of all the behaviors that I'm dealing with in the classroom. So that's where Skills for Connection came. I really looked into my therapy sessions. I looked at the heart of what it was that I was doing with my perspective taking, with my topic maintenance, with my emotional regulation things, with my problem solving, all the different constructs that I was teaching, and developed them into very organized structures that I now teach teachers how to do and integrate into their math lesson. So they don't have to add anything to their math lesson, but it becomes a way of organizing the information that serves to reinforce the skills that the therapists are doing in their one-to-one, and also serves to provide the, tier 1 support for students who, can use extra support, but don't necessarily need it. And then what I found, and this was actually a surprise to me, was that it also ended up supporting our teachers who were very burnt out and very overwhelmed, because now, in order for them to teach emotional regulation, they actually had to learn the emotional regulation practices. And in order to teach flexible thinking and, compassion, empathy, they had to learn how to do that for themselves. And they saw the benefit of it because they were learning it for the sake of the students. But in order to be able to use it and integrate it and to know how to use that during your, social studies lesson and to use it during lunch duty, you have to really understand the construct, really understand the core of it. So instead of it being like a spit back curriculum, like, okay, let me read this thing or show this video, anything like that, it became something that the teachers had to become the owners of, so they could integrate into every single situation that came up, which meant that the behaviors that they were dealing with stopped being problems and started being learning opportunities, which was a complete paradigm shift. And I wasn't even expecting that to happen. That was like something that happened as I was doing trainings and as I was hearing the feedback. That to me was like worth it all. Like that benefit of supporting our teachers, they need support.
Yeah.
Being able to do that aside from the students.
And I want to break that down just a little bit, because changing your mindset from this is a problem to this is a learning opportunity, you would think would be second nature to teachers. And yet when it comes to behavior, it's not. Behavior is, and social emotional skills by extension, because behavior is communication, right? And it's where kids are saying, I'm not happy with what's going on here, or I'm not happy with something else, and I need to let you know that this is not working. It's when behavior is communication, then we see it as it's like an affront to us as teachers, and that kids are doing it intentionally to tell us they don't like us or whatever, or something like that. And we take it much more personally than we should, when really it is just them expressing something. It's them expressing that they can't understand what's going on, or that they don't get it, or so many other things that it could be besides that. And we take it so personally in education. Why do you think teachers take it so personally when students misbehave?
So I think interestingly enough, it's actually what you started with saying how when we view our roles as, curriculum academic instructors, then anytime we have a behavior, it's getting in the way of our goal. If that is our sole goal, and our goal is, okay, let me make sure that they can know how to conjugate all their verbs, and that they can know, how to, synthesize this information in a, concise paragraph, then every behavior does become a challenge. And it becomes an affront, because then you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. But having that shift of our goal is real connection, real life connection to our learning, our growth, our development, our relationships, our communities, our country, our etc., the world, all the different things that we really interact with as human beings. And it becomes about, okay, how can I help the student develop them into connectors? Then it changes it. Then it doesn't have to become like, oh, you're attacking my goal, because that's part of your goal.
Yeah, I really like that, because what that highlights is that the behaviors don't have to be something that derails us. They can be something that reinforce the purpose of our job, which is to educate kids. And if all we are educating them on is language arts, math, and science, and social studies, then we're really missing the opportunity that we have to really help them become the kind of adults that we want them to be. And we really need to educate more than just these subjects. And I've said this a lot on the podcast, but I think it bears repeating here, because in Russia, where I lived for 2 years when I was younger, there's a way of saying that you educate a child first and foremost. So somebody there cannot say, I teach fourth grade, or I teach math. It just doesn't make sense in the language. So the language has something in place to prevent you from saying that you teach a subject. You always say, I teach kids to that subject, the same way that you would say, I take kids to the store. And so it's a really powerful way of understanding what our purpose is. Our purpose is not to teach a subject. Our purpose is to teach other human beings. And when we start approaching the problem in that way, then it makes it much easier to actually do that. And the behaviors don't seem like a problem. They seem like, oh, good, I have another learning opportunity right in front of me. What am I going to do? This is so exciting. And totally takes a different approach to that whole situation. John Catt Educational supports high-quality teaching and learning by providing publications that are research-based, practical, and focused on the key topics proven essential in today's and tomorrow's schools. The latest John Catt publications include a book whose bold, transformative ideas amaze and infuriate people around the world, according to one reviewer, a title from global leaders in curriculum planning, practice, and retrieval, one book that says stop talking and start doing with regard to teacher well-being, and much more. These books, used by educators of all roles across North America and worldwide, amplify fresh, engaging voices with practical strategies to create transformative change. Learn more in our show notes at jethrojones.com/podcast. So can you talk a little bit about how your RTI for SEL works and what it is that you're doing? And you don't have to go into detail about every single little thing, but give us a broad idea of what Tier 1 for SEL looks like.
So I usually start with something very, very basic, which is like self-awareness. Now, in my mind, the most basic thing that we can give a child, and when I say basic, it's like the most profound thing we can give them, is the recognition of who they are, what they're interacting with, and then what they choose to do from there, who they become from that situation. So for example, one of the constructs I teach is I see, I think, I feel, I choose. So I didn't invent seeing or thinking or feeling or choosing, but using this construct allows you to process information. So you can use this when you're processing your math worksheet. I see 10 problems. I think I'm never going to finish this. I feel despair. I choose to crumple my paper up and throw it on the floor. I see you have your paper crumpled up on the floor. I think you hate math. I feel frustrated. I choose to yell at you for crumpling up your paper. Or I see your paper's crumpled up. I think something's bothering him. I feel compassion. I choose to ask you what happened. You see how, and this process of allowing our teachers and our students to start recognizing the difference, first of all, between concrete information, the thought they choose to develop from that, the feeling that is connected, like a CBT prerequisite, an empathy prerequisite, and then the choice. In my mind, that's the most powerful part, where situations and feelings and thoughts don't necessarily have to dictate my choice that I have after that I am responsible for my choice. There's no diagnosis or situation or background or upbringing that is going to be the deciding factor of my choice. And it gives children and really our teachers the responsibility back to take control over their choices. And it also gives permission, like we were talking about, for it to not be a problem, but for it to be a learning process. And I keep on hearing from teachers again and again. And I just did this training in this school, and the principal came up to me afterwards, and she's like, "Thank you so much. What I found was that you told my teachers, you sort of gave them permission through this process. You see the student is crying. You think the class is going to erupt in mayhem. You feel panicky. You chose to yell, right? So now you can say, okay, now I see that I'm yelling. I think I'm a terrible teacher. I feel embarrassed. I choose to take a deep breath." And it sort of helps people in that process of like, okay, we're all growing. We're all developing. None of these things are problems. They all are learning opportunities. And it allows starts with our educators to, because they can't teach something that they're not doing, to be able to integrate these constructs, integrate these concepts that are really going to support flexible thinking and responsibility and emotional regulation and self-aware, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you see how like such a simple construct that you could put in your math lesson, or, that's actually an emotional expression of this math lesson, but it could even be more concrete. But you see how that can clearly educate in very core emotional connective ways, things that our kids need, things that our teachers need, and things that our therapists need, and things that our principals need, because it comes from leadership. Everything comes from leadership. And just living in that way and being able to think in that way. And I train people all the time, and I'll catch myself having to, restructure. Okay, so, I see the yogurt spilled all over the couch. I think my couch is never going to be clean again. I feel frustrated. I choose to take a deep breath. Now I have choice. I'm not a victim to a situation. I'm not a victim to anything, because I have a choice to decide how I respond to the situation. I was teaching a class once, and suddenly one of the kids runs to the back of the classroom, shuts the light off. Mm-hmm. Now, if I could just explain to you how challenging this class was in general without the light turned off, you would probably cry with me right now. But, thankfully, I had been really practicing these tools. Okay, so I see the light off. I think the classroom is about to erupt in chaos. I feel panicky. I choose to leave the classroom. No, just kidding. I choose to take a deep breath. Okay, now what am I going to do? I see the light off. I think I'm going to make the best of the situation. I feel determined. I choose to continue teaching with my hand over the light. Whatever it is, like we're teaching a way of thinking, a way of processing, a way of living. And when it comes from our leadership, it's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift for our kids, and it no longer becomes like an abstract concept. Our students immediately see what it looks like in real life, and our teachers see how it benefits them, and it's not more work. It's helpful.
Yeah, that's very good. I like this approach. I think that it's definitely something that needs to happen. My wife recently started doing some life coaching, and there's a very similar model that they use to help people work through things. And
TFAR?
I don't know if that's what it's called. She joined it, not me, so I'm not sure. Okay. but she has, one of the things that has definitely brought about is that I used to be able to tease her about some things and just get her fired up. And I can't anymore because she's using this model to make it so that she doesn't lose control of herself. And it's really fascinating because she's a very mature grown woman who is a wonderful mom and a wonderful wife, and yet this little thing that I used to just have fun with, I can't do anymore because she's been able to outmaneuver me, and it's lost all of its fun because I can't goad her on things. And I just think it's really interesting how that's helped in so many other ways besides just that one example of how she talks to our kids, what she tells them she's thinking about things, how she's feeling about things. All of that is just so incredibly powerful. And it really goes back to what you said about it. It matters how the leader in the situation deals with it, because if you deal with it as the teacher in the classroom, you have control, so much more control over the classroom than if you don't do it this way. So one of the things I tell kids all the time is, are you going to let that person control you? Well, of course not. I don't want them to control me. Then why are you letting them make you so upset right now? Well, I'm not. I'm choosing to be upset. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. And it's like, anytime you give up your control to someone else, then that's exactly what happens, is you let them control you. So the next thing is, so that's tier 1, everybody's getting it. What's the tier 2 and tier 3 strategies to keep with the RTI theme?
So if you were using that same I see, I think, I feel, I choose, you would have the opportunity to really explore with a student. So usually the kids that you're seeing in your tier 2, tier 3 are kids who have IEPs, and talking through that process will be a lot more challenging. So it'll require more effort and more repetition and more specific examples. So I'm thinking of a student who I worked with. I'm going to fudge the details. Don't worry. If you hear me, I'm not talking about you. Who struggled with ADHD. And the thought process was, ADHD is, I'm a victim to ADHD. My teacher needs to understand me. They need to understand me, which is a very unhealthy, unhelpful, non-growthful, non-locus of control way of interacting, and wasn't actually empowering him to move forward. This was a message he was getting from his family and from media and everything, that of like, everyone needs to understand me. And it wasn't helping him. It was not serving him well. He wasn't having relationships and friendships, and I had him with me as a social worker, and being able to process with him. Okay, so what are you experiencing? What do you see? Okay, like I see my heartbeat is going faster, or I see that the fire truck is going outside of the classroom, or I see the hundreds of pieces of data that he was getting at that moment. And I think this is impossible. So you're thinking this is impossible, and you feel hopeless or helpless, and you choose to continue with the behavior that you're doing, kicking the desk or not paying attention, or, telling the teacher, I can't do this anymore, or whatever the choice that that student was making, walking through with them their own process. So that's, let's say, from a social work perspective. From, let's say, a speech language pathology perspective, what is it that you're seeing that's teaching them? So a student who doesn't know how to communicate, that doesn't have the language skills, giving them that structure of, okay, so like, how do I communicate what's going on in my world? They come into the therapy center, they're just like, I hate it. You hate what? It. and like they don't necessarily have the language, the description, expressive language skills to be able to communicate what's going on, and giving them that construct, giving them that structure, and helping them then develop. Okay, so you saw your sister was wearing your sweatshirt and you thought, how dare she? And you felt so betrayed, or you felt so helpless, and you chose to slap her. Okay, just even breaking down the story. So now they can communicate what happened to them. Mom, I saw she's wearing my sweatshirt. And I was thinking, she's not allowed to wear my sweatshirt. She always takes my sweatshirt. And I was feeling so upset. And I chose, okay, and then recognizing, owning the decision that they made, I chose to slap her. So now that person has a skill, they can communicate, they can advocate for themselves and use those skills. So these type of constructs are things they can use like throughout the day. Like I said, with the math lesson, even looking at the math sheet and being like, okay, I see a lot of numbers. I'm thinking maybe there's a pattern here. I'm feeling curious. And then allowing another student to see like, oh, you see all those numbers and you're thinking, I see they're all even, and you're feeling excited, and just allowing them to see that there's objective information is different than my thought, and my thought is connected to my feeling, and allowing them to see the distinction between that allows for flexible thinking. It allows for perspective taking. It allows for so many other core skills when our teachers are using it and our therapists are using it in their therapy sessions. That's what it would look like tier 2, tier 3, for example.
Great. Thank you. So again, we're just scratching the surface here. I definitely want to encourage people to follow Miriam on Twitter at Skills4Connection, or to check out her website, which is skills4connection.com, to learn more about this and to figure out ways that you can apply it to yourself. She does also have a free demo there as well. So go to skills4connection.com and check that out and look at what's there, see how you can apply this in your school, and then reach out to her if you think she can help. My final question for you, Miriam, is what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
I think remembering for themselves that behaviors are learning opportunities, and that includes behaviors of teachers. What the teachers are coming to them with, the challenges and the burnout and the feelings, that is the teacher learning, experiencing learning development and learning curves, and being able to be a role model of how the teacher can process that will provide that leadership for how the teacher can then bring that to the classroom. So that's what I would say could be a role for the principals this week.
Okay. Thank you very much, Miriam, for being part of Transformative Principal. As a reminder, you can get her information at skills4connection.com. Thanks so much for being here, Miriam. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was truly lovely.